meeting to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everybody tonight. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from October the 25th. Any corrections, changes, questions, comments? No? All right, if not, we'll approve those as submitted. Next item, report of the town manager, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Mayor Black, members of council. Did want to report that we did have a pipe failure downstairs in the police department, so yeah, more an example of the fact that we need to improve our quarters, but also we are experiencing more and more maintenance type issues with this building, which is only slightly older than I am at this point. I wanted to report that scheduled maintenance work at the Snowden hydroelectric plant was recently completed, and both units are up and running, which is something we haven't been able to say for a while. On an administrative note, I want to report that town offices will be closed next week on Thursday, November 24th, and Friday, November 25th, in observance of the Thanksgiving holiday. Also wanted to extend condolences to Deborah Anderson and her family in the passing of Kurt Gilkson, and also to the family of Tommy Reynolds, who recently passed away. And on a happier note, at this point, I would like to recognize Chief Lewis for a very special presentation.
Chief.
Yes, I would like to have Officer Spielberg stand up here, and he just graduated the academy, so we would like to swear him in into the tradition of the Bedford Police Department. He did an excellent job at the academy, and from what I hear, he's doing a solid job out in field training, so we're excited to have him.
I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the laws and ordinances of the town of Bedford, that I will abide by the code of ethics for law enforcement officers and the rules and regulations of the town of Bedford Police Department, that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a police officer of the town of Bedford, according to the best of my ability, so help me God. Congratulations.
Congratulations and welcome, Officer Spielberg. Thank you for your willingness to serve the town of Bedford. We appreciate it. Next item, appearance before council. Mr. Parker signed up to speak with us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Contrary to my normal abilities, I'll be short and brief. But I have to say something. Congratulations to the new officer. We're getting younger. 57 years ago, I took the oath as a police officer. On to more cheerful things. I have a request for you. As you're well aware, a year ago, last November, the Bedford Boys Tribute Center commenced with Operation Bedford Remembers. Our local Company A, 1st Battalion, 116th Infantry Regiment, by the Army nomenclature today, is the 116th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, departed Bedford for their one-year deployment to Africa. Happily, they're all home in Virginia, safe and sound. Now, we did commence the Adopt a Soldier program, and I'm very, very pleased to report to you, when you talk about the pride and spirit of Bedford, 220 residents stepped up and adopted one of these soldiers. And through that course of the year, wrote letters back and forth, several hundred care packages. So we're really proud of our local citizenry for stepping up to the home front performed again. Before you tonight, I am requesting permit, if you will, for 2 street closures. One is for Saturday, next February the 11th, wherein the Tribute Center will be hosting a welcome home parade for our local boys, Company A. 130 soldiers, 125 male, 5 female, and they stood on the shoulders of our beloved Bedford boys in their duty. The parade will be very, very similar to the Christmas parade as far as the route goes, okay? But I will say it's going to be a big one. We're going to have all 3 high school bands, 29th Infantry Division Band, and we'll have every kid in town who's never been in a parade. They're invited. The Boys and Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, all the high school clubs will have floats. In short, we're trying to present to the town the Welcoming Home Parade like was planned 3 years ago and sadly was rained out on June the 8th of 2019. So we want to make this a full community. And then the second request is closure for right out front from North Bridge Street to Court Street, wherein we have the Bedford Boys Tribute Center has its annual evening presentation ceremony, the evening of D-Day each year, presentation of the ivy wreath presented in front of the memorial stone. So that's the 2 events, and I humbly request that you can kindly waive the fees for those events. Any questions? I'm more than happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Parker? No.
The only question I have, with the reef laying event up here, does that close the whole street up there or just certain areas of the street?
No, just the whole street. We had a tremendous turnout last year. This next June the 6th will be our 3rd. We had a triple-sized crowd from the first time to last year that now requires the closure of the street, as the chief knows. That was a busy time. So.
What time, on that event, because that, obviously that's a weekday,
Right.
you know, and I see you got 4 to 8, so, what time is like the actual event gonna kind of, but I just wonder if there's any way, you know, to get that 5 o'clock traffic, if we can move that, maybe back
well,
up.
Here essentially is a chronology. Actually, it's a pretty short ceremony, commencing at 6:15. You know, a couple keynote speakers, myself, General Ted Shuey, retired Brigadier General, Virginia National Guard, will be speaking. And leading up to then the presentation of the ivy wreath in front of the memorial stone by the children of Lieutenant Nance and Staff Sergeant Stevens, okay?
Right.
Which they did for many, many years, decades. So we've continued that tradition. And then at 6:44 precisely, nationally and Bedford County, it's requested that all church bells ring for 1 minute, which will be at the same time that the bell on the courthouse will be ringing to commemorate our 19 Bedford boys. And then shortly thereafter should culminate the playing of the taps. The reason I left that window open is this time we want to set up a tent, a huge shade tent.
In the street?
Because the sun was terrible.
Well, it's pretty rough.
And seated, it'll be for invitation only to the direct relatives of the Bedford boys. Okay, so they'll have to be seated under the tent. So that's what I'm saying, a little bit play by ear, I guess, with the help of the guard and so forth, we can get that thing set up maybe starting at 5 o'clock. You see what I'm saying?
I'm just trying to think.
We'll pare it down, I just want to leave a
Okay.
window
All right.
open.
Any other questions?
Okay, question.
Yes.
Have you talked to DW and Public Works about this, filled out your
Yes,
application?
the required forms have all been filled out last week. DW has those applications.
All right. And we'll talk to, we'll figure out on that fee, how the best way to handle that. Yep.
Yeah, that I was sure, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see here, council comments. We'll start, Bob, anything?
Yeah, certainly want to congratulate you, Chief, and the officers you just swore in. We continue to bring them in that size, and of course, was even bigger, but congratulations on that. It was a good program for the veterans. They moved it to Moose. Afterward, a lot of us went to D-Day until they told us they were shutting it down because of the storm. But that was a good program. This is something for us to look forward to. And Deborah, you have my condolences. I'm sorry to hear that. But it's been a pretty good weekend from my end. I don't have any complaints. Everything was all good, and I hope it continues to be that. And I'm glad to have you back, Bruce.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're back, and Mr. Mayor, I'm glad you're hitting on all cylinders tonight.
We'll see.
But that's all I have.
Thank you.
I was going to say congratulations on the new police officers, and Deborah, you have my prayers and my thoughts with your loss of your family.
Same, Chief, just keep bringing in good candidates, good officers, and keep them going. Keep them here. And Deborah, again, you were in my thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, the program that was presented, the veterans program that was presented at the Moose Lodge was excellent. They did a really nice job of presenting our vets and what they've done for this country. I don't think we can do enough for the veterans. All too often they're forgotten, particularly Vietnam veterans. So I'm glad to see that was, they were all present and accounted for. And you know, I won't go further for what happens with Deborah's son. That's terrible. I'm sorry about that. That's all.
Okay, first I want to say it's great to be back. I got some good ideas when I was up in Michigan. I'm going to talk to Bart and Mary Zirkle about to see what we can do to implement them here. Also, another thing is congratulations to our newest officer. If he was here in this room right now, I would tell him, welcome aboard. We're glad to have him. Also, I would like to give my condolences to Deborah, to Rosalind Reynolds, and to the people at UVA that lost their lives during the shooting, and I would request that we have a moment of silence for all these people.
Thank you, Bruce. Once again, Chief, welcome aboard the newest officer, and you know we're like I said, we're glad to have him, and look forward to serving the town under your leadership. So, congratulations to him. Deborah, like I said, I echo everybody's thoughts. You know, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and if there's anything you need from us, you just let us know. Okay, we'll keep you in our thoughts and prayers too. I did talk to Bart at some point in the future. I would like to probably recognize Mr. Reynolds. You know, he served on the City Planning Commission, the City School Board, and did a good bit here in town through his business and development. And so at some point, when it's appropriate and when the family feels like they would like to do that, I would like to have the family here and issue a proclamation in his honor. So we'll take care of that in the near future. That's all I have this evening. Report of council committees. The only committee met was finance. CJ, it's kind of going to be here in a minute anyway.
Yeah, we had earlier this evening, had a finance committee meeting. Rep from Brown Edwards went over a very good detailed report, and we got good marks. A few questions were asked, but very clearly explained, and we'll hear more about it during the meeting.
All right. Any revisions to the agenda? I don't think we have any revisions tonight. Nothing there. All right. The first item of business is the public hearing for the American Rescue Plan Act budget appropriation. Mr. Wallen.
Notice is hereby given that the town council of the town of Bedford, Virginia, at 7:00 p.m. on Tuesday, November 15th, 2022, will hold a public hearing at the council hall to consider a budget amendment to appropriate budget for the American Rescue Plan Act allocation received in an amount of $6,844,498. Virginia Code Section 15.2-2507 provides that any locality may amend its budget to adjust the aggregate amount to be appropriated during the fiscal year as shown in the currently adopted budget. Provided, however, any such amendment which exceeds 1% of the total expenditure shown in the currently adopted budget must be accomplished by first publishing a notice of a meeting and holding a public hearing before amending the budget. This code section applies to all locality funds, including general fund, enterprise fund, capital fund, etc. Because the cumulative amount of the appropriations exceeds 1% of the currently adopted budget, a budget amendment public hearing is required. A copy of the detailed budget amendment request has been available for inspection by the public in the office of the clerk of council. And tonight, anyone who wishes to speak to the matter is invited to do so.
All right, so I will open the public hearing on the American Rescue Plan Act budget appropriation. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on that matter? No? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Next item, appointment of a member for the Planning Commission.
Mayor Black, members of council, a vacancy exists on the Planning Commission due to a member stepping down before the end of their term. Ms. Georgianne Watts and Mr. Curtis Marshall have both expressed an interest in being appointed. The vacancy has been advertised in a local newspaper, and no other citizens have volunteered or stepped forward to serve. Tonight, council is requested to appoint either Ms. Georgianne Watts or Mr. Curtis Marshall to serve on the Planning Commission, said term to expire March 31, 2025.
All right, so we have two members here, or two applicants for this position on the Planning Commission. Do we have a motion, or would you, any discussion? Does anybody have any thoughts on either candidate?
Okay, I kind of looked at both of the applications today, and, you know, when I compared them both, I think the better candidate, in my opinion, is Curtis, because one thing I go right down to is I look at their comments and seeing why they want to serve, and I kind of like his reasons a little bit better.
Anybody?
Yeah, I'm looking over both of these, and I worked with Ms. Watts for quite a number of years. She's very sharp, very smart, very hard-working individual at the hospital. I might seem a little impartial, but I would suggest, but as I was reading both of these, my question is, would she like one or the other, or was she going to try to get them both of them? That's what I'm trying to, because they're applying for both of them.
Yeah.
So is it one or the other, or both of them?
I think it would be one or the other at this
She
point.
would be good on either one.
Either one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at too, Ron, and that she applied for both. So I wondered if there was any preference either way that she may have, so. I think she'd be a very good candidate on one of them. I think Mr. Marshall, we had talked to him earlier, I believe, at one point. So I think he's, of course, heavily involved in the fire department and lives in Bedford, so I think either one of these will be fine. So I really don't have a preference for either way, but go one here and one with the housing authority either way.
Yeah, I guess kind of my only thought is, time commitment. I mean, our planning commission is in the middle of rewriting our zoning ordinance. I mean, they've got a lot of work on their plate, and whoever we appoint is really gonna have to do a lot of catch-up. So, you know, I don't know, Mary, did either one of them, did we have any conversation with them about where we are in that process, or any response, if you don't mind, if you've talked to either one of them or both, if you don't mind? Because that's my concern, is who's gonna be able to get up to speed the quickest.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have spoken with Georgia Watts as she was retiring from the hospital, and she said, I would like to take on more responsibility or be more involved in the community now that I'll have more time. It's like, oh, wait, when I get an opening, I'm gonna contact you. And it just so happened there were two openings at the same time, one for housing, one for planning commission. She asked me which would be better. I said, well, if you want more of a challenge, it would be the planning commission due to the time commitment and the meetings that they have and where they are with the zoning ordinance. So she is aware of that. So she actually I needed full disclosure, she was leaning towards the housing authority, but she felt she would be up to the challenge of being a planning commissioner with learning new things from her skill set at the hospital. I have not spoken with Mr. Marshall other than an interview I did with him when he was in school.
All right.
Well, I look at both applications, and, I mean, Ms. Watts has been here for like 6 or 7 years, so she knows the community very well. But like I said, Mr. Marshall, he's been here about around 15 years, and he has been a part of the volunteer fire department in our community for years and stuff like that. So, I mean, either candidate would be fine, to my point.
This is kind of a rarity. We normally don't have two of them.
We
have to discuss.
But I agree with the mayor. I think the time commitment in the planning commission is one of the major things that's going to play in the either candidate. So,
Do we have any idea what Mr. Marshall does for a living, other than, I know you all.
He works at Fort Pickett Fire and Rescue. Well, you know, Fort Pickett's 2 hours east of here. So, I mean, I don't know what that means to his schedule, you know, but
Will he be able to commit the time?
That's true.
I don't know. I mean,
I think somebody said at one point he was heavily involved in the drone technology and all that, so.
he is.
I think he helps with the fire
He's
department also.
very involved with drone technology.
Yeah,
I think he runs his own
business. I believe.
business
Yeah.
based on the drone technology. I think he's done some stuff with the town at one time years ago, or whatever, if I remember correctly, so.
Well, the fact that he works at Fort Pickett Fire and Rescue doesn't really tell you what,
yeah, I
What he
mean,
does.
yeah.
what does that tell you? It doesn't tell you how, whether he's administrative, is he hands-on, is he, and I'm not, you know, like I said, this is gonna be a commitment of hours, so.
And Mary, you said that Ms. Watts was leaning towards the planning commission, you felt towards?
The-
The
Housing authority.
Housing authority.
Mr. Mayor,
Mhm.
to the extent that it matters here as a potential consideration, looking at the housing authority applications, Bill Mosley is active in development and construction and so forth. And to the extent it matters, and I would kind of defer to what you know and what Ms. Zirkle knows, but if he is on the redevelopment and housing authority, the housing authority can't touch him and he can't touch the housing authority because there's major conflict
Conflicts.
issues because the housing authority goes through using so much federal funds. I don't know whether that's something to take into consideration, whether he's a person that they ever do contracts with, but any of that would have to immediately stop, so.
That's a good point.
All right. Anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Well, I'll move that we appoint Mr. Marshall for the Planning Commission and Ms. Watts for the Housing Authority.
Can we do that one?
Yeah, it's a consent.
Can we do that one motion? Okay.
I'll second.
So the motion is to appoint Mr. Marshall to the Planning Commission and Ms. Watts to the Housing Authority. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Who was the second?
Stacy.
Stacy. Mr. Carson?
Aye.
Mr. Haley?
Aye.
Mr. Hartwick?
Aye.
Mr. Johansson?
Aye.
Mr. Schoen? Oh, I'm sorry, he's absent. Mr. Stanley?
Aye.
Mayor Black?
Aye.
Motion carries with 6 ayes.
All right. Next item is the presentation of the fiscal year 2022 audit report from Brown Edwards. Chris?
Good evening. I'm Chris Banta. I'm a partner with oversight of the town's audit. It's good to see everybody. We just had a pretty lengthy finance committee meeting, as was mentioned by council members. So we went over all the results in a lot more detail. As I mentioned, your finance committee does ask a lot of questions, which is really nice as an auditor. You take the process serious. Also want to commend your team here and everybody else in the town. You have a new person in finance, and we're here in November presenting. That is not common at a lot of my localities right now. So what we're going to do is go over the results of the audit at a very high level. It is the culmination of a very long process. We start reaching out to the town probably in April or May to start coordinating. We start having our planning meetings. And I mean, we're 7 months later, we're wrapping it up. But it's a very long process, thousands of hours by both us and the town, and happy to present some results today. There's a number of phases to the audit. The first phase of the audit is the primary reason that you engage us as auditors, and that's to give you an opinion on your financial statements. And that's the 200-page document that you have in front of you. I'm happy to report that our opinion reads as follows. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. That's the highest level of assurance that we as external auditors can give on a set of audited financial statements. So I want to once again commend your team and the whole town for getting us to this point. Second phase of the audit is a compliance audit. We are required by the state of Virginia to perform compliance procedures in accordance with state code. If we have findings or internal control weaknesses, we have to report those to you in our letters that are also included with the financial report. Happy to report no significant deficiencies in your internal controls or no material weaknesses to report. That gives you assurance that your vendors are paid timely, your employees are paid timely, collections are made appropriately, and your financials are compiled without fraud or internal control deficiencies. And also, we had no compliance findings with the state of Virginia compliance supplement. So that's the results. Also, just to let you know how the audit itself went, if we had things such as disagreements with management, difficulties with management, if to get a clean opinion required significant audit adjustments or things of that nature, I would have to report those to you, and I'm happy to report we had no matters like that, and that's quite uncommon for most of my clients. So we do appreciate everyone's hard work and getting to this point. So, any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? No? All right, thank you all for your hard work again, and appreciate it. And we appreciate your engagement with us, and we'll see you next year.
Appreciate it.
Go Hokies.
All right, next item is the American Rescue Plan Act budget appropriation.
Mayor Black, members of council, the town of Bedford has received $6,844,498 in federal funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, commonly known as ARPA, specifically the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. The town entered into a grant subrecipient agreement with the Bedford Regional Water Authority for projects totaling $4.5 million to to assist with water and sewer infrastructure needs of the community. These funds have not been expensed and need to be appropriated to correctly account for the funding in the current fiscal year. The remaining $2,344,498 of federal funding is allocated towards replacing lost public sector revenue. Final rule issued by the U.S. Department of the Treasury allows local governments using funds for lost public sector revenue to elect a standard allowance of up to $10 million to spend on government services through the period of performance. The provision of government services includes salaries and benefits paid to provide services, which allows the town's funding budgeted for these items to either remain unspent or to be reappropriated to other expenditure items. Tonight, Town Council is requested to approve the below budget amendment, which will appropriate budget to the general ledger accounts as follows. A revenue increase in the line item entitled ARPA Relief Funding of $6,844,498, and expenditure increases totaling that amount in the following line items: compensation, compensation overtime, compensation part-time, FICA, VRS retirement, VRS life insurance, VRS hybrid disability, ICMA hybrid retirement, and hospital insurance, with the remaining $4.5 million remaining for water and sewer ARPA funds.
All right. Do we have a motion to appropriate the ARPA funding for $6,844,498 as outlined in these line items?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? So in theory, this means we can now use this, the difference, the $2,384,000 in those line items, pay for those things in this fiscal year, and then those items that we had them budgeted anyway, so now we can take that money and figure out what other uses we want to put. Is that basically what this is saying, correct?
Correct.
All right. Okay, just want to make sure that's what I understood that to be. All right.
Roll call. Mr. Haley?
Aye.
Mr. Hartwick?
Aye.
Mr. Johansson?
Aye.
Mr. Stanley?
Aye.
Mr. Carson?
Aye.
Mayor Black?
Aye.
Motion carries with 6 ayes.
All right, next item, the 2022 personal property tax billing.
Consultation with the town attorney staff, primarily Ms. Cantrell, will make a presentation to council of one or more options to provide additional financial assistance to offset the considerably increased assessment values for the 2022 personal property tax billing. This was based on the direction provided at the last council meeting, and I know that Ann and Mike have worked on several concepts and hopefully one or two options specifically that you can choose from.
Okay.
Good evening. And hopefully Mike can chime in if he has anything to add or if I say anything incorrectly. It looks like there's two main options for us in the state code, that we can either rebate back to our citizens a payment, or we can basically provide, how do you say it, an adjustment to the assessment on the bills. The tricky part for us is that the assessments that we've been received have been finalized in our accounting software. So that means that we can't go in and change the assessments in like a mass sweep. We would have to do all of those one by one. And the same is true on a rebate back to our citizens, but if you do a fixed dollar amount versus saying a percentage, it would be a lot easier for us to calculate it. There would be less room for errors. So those are our two options. We can either do a rebate back to our citizens on payment, and there's some question for us on doing it up front, but I think we're comfortable enough.
I think I'm comfortable with it as long as we have an ordinance that's fairly structured. We would have to adopt an ordinance to implement that.
So yes, so that's option one, and then option two is we would change like the assessment values on our vehicles. Essentially, we would say, instead of valuing them at 100%, we value them at like 90%.
So, what was our average increase in assessed value, kinda, just so we know where our starting kind of, was it like 40?
I didn't look at the value as much as I looked at the bill, the people who actually received a bill.
Right.
And the average bill is about $190, and if you looked at the year before, it was about half of that.
So roughly,
So it almost
Almost a
doubled for those who
50%.
were getting a bill.
which is, that's what I was afraid ours was higher. But keep in mind, we do give the full 100% on the first 20,000. My thought on we talked about this, and I thought, the fixed amount at first is definitely the easiest. Everybody gets the same dollar amount, but the more I thought about that, I'm like, that's really not fair, because the guy that's got one car is getting an X amount, and the guy that's got 10 cars is getting X amount. So from a tax relief standpoint, it's, even though the dollar amount, and even though total, we're given probably, the 30% or whatever relief, it's just, so even though I know that's the easiest way, I'm not sure that's the kind of the fairest way.
Agreed, that's essentially what I said to Mike.
Yeah.
The only complicating factor is that we have 7,406 vehicles. So to change the assessment, there's no quick way to do it. So we would just need time, and it's manual. So think a very long Excel spreadsheet.
So
We would have to extend the deadline?
we're definitely gonna have to extend it.
Yes.
So let me throw another idea out. Would it be easier to adjust our tax rate to get this kind of the same, okay, we're only gonna get the X amount of revenue. We don't have to mess with the assessments, but we change the tax rate from $1.07 to whatever it needs to be. I don't know if that's if that gets you to the same place, because then everybody gets the same.
Can you retroactively change?
Can you change a rate after we've passed? I mean, I know we'd probably have to have a public hearing, but I hate to throw you on the spot, Mike, but is that a possibility? Do you see what I'm saying? If we want to cut 33% off of what we're getting, say, okay, so do we cut 33% off the rate, and then you're just plugging that number into your bill instead of trying to recalculate?
Let me chime in for a second. If you do that, however, as part of next year's budget, we're going to have to look at a rate that's going to be different as well. So
Yeah, it's going to have to
you
go.
can change the rate, and I'll defer to Mr. Lockby on that. That creates some turbulence in the tax rates that we've never had.
Right, but I mean, we have to explain that this is a one-time, really, tax.
But we'll have to go back and set it at something else.
That's something else. Yeah, no, I get that.
And what percent are we looking at, the 30 or?
I don't know.
And do you have any?
It's totally up to you. I mean, right now, we're giving 100% relief on the first 20,000 of assessment. And so how this equals out is we're giving on the assessment $443,000 of relief. $280,000 of that is from the state, PPTRA, and then we're already giving $162,000 on top of that as a local tax relief to our citizens.
So we're already given a big chunk. But do you see my point on the flat fee? I mean, that's,
Does that make it more complicated?
no, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
But it's, like I said, it's not really across.
Staff is committed to providing the relief either way, don't get me wrong. It's just,
Okay. So the bills are just waiting
Well,
to be processed?
Essentially, we're having, I would say, an IT issue with the bill printing. So right now, our bill form is not printing the details of the vehicles on the bill. So we're in limbo right now, waiting for that to be resolved. But everything is finalized, so the property book is in, the bills are out there. So if somebody called, we have the information available. just haven't been able to print the final.
So, where are you, on, like, on the bill? So we got the assessment, then minus the credit, or the relief, times the rate. Is that what ours kind of, is ours look similar to the county?
Yes,
So, and you can't change that assessed number
no,
in Munis because it's set up not to be allowed to do that, so
Well-
people don't mess
Well,
with
it's
it.
been assessed, I mean, we can't
Right.
change it.
right.
So you, yeah,
We basically have to do what we call a manual adjustment to the bill. So each bill, we would have to go in and we'd have to do an adjustment and post it.
and the way the county did it, they did a credit at the end, I mean, they said, which, that kind of, you don't get your, it affects your relief by doing it that way too. You don't, because you're now decreasing the amount of relief you got from, so that first $20,000, you would not get relief on that if you said, take the final bill and say cut off a third.
It's applying it disproportionately, I guess, because
Right.
if it's 25,000, it's applying it to the whole 25.
Right.
The provision of code that probably makes the most sense to use is that there's a provision that says that in any year in which you have reported a surplus, you may by ordinance rebate some amount of that. You can establish by ordinance how you want to do it, whatever you think is fair.
Right.
Given that our personal property book is already closed, and we had a particular amount, I can't remember what it was, but let's just say it was $150,000 was how much we thought we were going to get in revenue. Now that the book is closed, you look at it and, oh wait, it's going to be $220,000. We know that there's going to be some collection loss in there and other things. We could pick a proportion of that amount that we're over what our budget was and say, we're going to put that in onto the bill as a credit. And there was a question that we had where the way that the language of the statute says is in any year in which the locality has a surplus. Obviously, you can't know 100% what surplus you're going to have until you've actually collected it. But I think that given that the personal property book is, once the book closes, you've got a pretty good idea because you're going to have 90+% collections in any given year. So that would be, I think, probably the suggestion that handles this legally, and it also puts you in a position where you're not going to be next spring trying to explain to everybody, and I'm just going to be more forthright than I probably ought to be, but trying to explain to everybody why their personal property tax rate has to
Went
go
back up.
up.
Right.
Has to go back up.
Right.
It just makes Ms. Cantrell's life miserable, so.
So what do you think is a fair, have you all looked at some numbers on, I mean, what a fair relief should be?
I mean, our book closed, we're billing 255,000. Our budget was 125,000. So we have considerable room there. It's essentially what we need to know is how much do you want to rebate back? Like, what is a reasonable amount, and then we can allocate it across the bills.
Right.
And that's what we have to decide tonight. You
Yeah.
came
It
with
doesn't
some,
have to be decided
no,
tonight.
but you came with some good options, and so far, from what I can tell, you're doing an excellent job at what you do. You gave us some good options. Now, in your best opinion, what would you do that makes it easier on you and Mr. Lockley? What would you do? We don't necessarily have to take it, but I know you've given that some thought, you know, because it seems like this is going to be kind of difficult for you the way we go. So what would you do?
My preference, the easiest on staff, and probably the easiest to explain, is for each citizen that receives a bill to give a credit up to a certain dollar amount. So if they receive a $5 bill, not to credit them $30, credit them the $5, and we wipe it out. But you cap it. So if it's $30, $40, $50, however much relief you want to give back, assign a cap value. I know it's not the fairest method because you're going to hit some of your higher earners are going to probably end up paying more
with that method instead of a flat percent. But
Could-
it's more administratively easy.
Would it be, how administratively difficult would it be if you said we gave a credit per vehicle on that bill?
We could do that.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you said, you know,
Like a certain percent.
well, I mean, but that's still not gonna work out, because, I mean, one guy gets $5 off, and the guy's got $5 off, gets $25 off, so, I mean,
I like to compare it to like what the state did. You know how they pushed out the $200 refund? Very similar to that is kind of what we're discussing.
So how much do we want to give back? You got, you're 125 over from what you had originally budgeted,
well, I mean, obviously, we're not gonna collect all of it in the time period.
so you're going to get 90% of it,
I mean,
right?
we've got inflationary pressures, just like that's what drove up the,
True.
I mean, we're paying more for diesel, we're paying more for, you know,
You use
having to keep
cars.
employees, I mean, you know, so, I mean,
And we have roughly 1,438 people receive a bill. So 4,608 accounts or citizens in the town, and 1,438 receive a bill. So the other citizens have vehicles that are less than $20,000.
so they already don't pay any tax in the town.
And just a note to think about,
112,000.
businesses are included in this as well. In that 1,438, so it's not just individuals, you're also talking about businesses who are paying on their vehicles.
You want to get back about 110, something like that.
I don't know if we want to go that much, but I guess.
Yeah, I was
Well, that's
thinking,
90
I was thinking
that's
of
90%.
25 or 30%.
Yeah.
Kind of keep it similar to what the county did. I mean, even, we could do a little less than the 33 that the county did, because
25%.
we already give them
Provide their own
$20,000 worth, and, you know, so, I mean, 20 to 25, but,
So I mean, if you take 125,000 times 30%, and then you divide it across the 1,438 bills, it would be 26 a bill.
so if we did like $30 a bill.
Sound like a winner. We could kick this around the rest of the.
Yeah, it's just,
Let's just do it, guys.
any thoughts?
Like watching soccer.
So $25, $30 a bill.
One thing I also need to note is we will probably need to do something, I don't know if it's an ordinance or resolution, to move the due date or extend the penalty.
We can do that. There's a state code section. We just would, it would have to be a council resolution, but we can put that through at the same time we act on the ordinance.
Yeah, so when do you think we need to, because we're not gonna be able to act, we're now not gonna be able to act on that till the, or can we, because we can't act on this tonight, can we, or can we?
Well,
Next meeting.
Because do we have to have a public hearing on this?
To extend the, to do the credit, you would need to be an ordinance, and I would need to draft something up.
So we would
To
have-
extend the due date, I'm gonna get on my laptop and ignore you for a few minutes while I figure that out. So if you wanna just do the next resolution and come back to this one, is that all right, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, that'd be fine, I mean, because, yeah,
Yeah.
we just need to figure out how long yeah. All right,
Because I think, when's the next meeting, is it?
not till the middle of December.
Yeah, the due date's the 5th, so
Yeah.
I don't know if you can retroactively do it.
I'll figure out how to do it tonight if it's possible.
But my one question would be, how many people you said we're gonna tax a refund back, 1,000?
1,438.
Okay, so some people will understand that don't pay taxes, and some people won't understand that. So there's gonna be questions from people that don't understand that. Why are you giving taxes to them people and not giving it to them, but they don't realize that cause is under $20,000? So that's one thing that needs to be clarified, definitely.
well, actually, on our bills, we'll print a statement, we provide 100% tax relief, so.
Okay.
Once we get them printed, it'll be on there.
Yes, it does. I have confirmed that. It does state that, and it also states on there, I believe it's on the back, that some people may not receive a bill because of the 100% relief.
And actually, we're doing more than, so I didn't even, so we're doing that much more over the 20, and how does that work? We're just because of the rate, so that extra,
When you've been adopting the rate, you've been adopting 100% relief, but the state relief is flat. That's not changing.
Okay.
And so theoretically, like each year when I come to do taxes with you, I would come and say, the rate this year should be 68%. So I would have that analysis for you at that time. I don't know if that has been done.
It has, and we also haven't had the unusual assessment.
right. Do you think that number will actually, will that number from the state change next year?
It's been
Reversion?
flat.
Their relief, that $200,000, until the General Assembly changes it, will be there forever. Boy, just contradicting myself, didn't I?
Indefinitely.
It originally was
It'll
supposed
be there
to
until
cover
it's not.
all personal property tax, I believe, and then at one point the state could not afford it and they had to freeze the program.
Right.
This was in the early 2000s.
That's
So we'll
why
get-
280 is actually.
We won't get
started.
increased funding from the state next year because of the personal property. This is not based on the assessed value of the,
It's just frozen based on that legislative action.
Wow.
And is not likely to change anytime soon, so.
No.
The answer is that you can extend it for up to 90 days by simple resolution. So you can extend the due date tonight if you'd like to.
So when do you think, what time do you, when do you think, how much time you need and to get, you want to go to what?
The cleanest thing to do would probably be at this point just to match where the Bedford County extended theirs. So then the
January
citizens
31st.
is less confusing.
January 31st, and
Yes.
that's what they did there.
Would that be okay?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay.
All right, so do we want to go ahead and get a motion to extend that? Is it? We can go ahead and do that. So
Move we extend the date to January 31st.
all right, we got a
Second.
motion. Second. All right, Bruce, second. All right, all, roll call.
Mr. Hartwick?
Aye.
Mr. Johansson?
Aye.
Mr. Stanley?
Aye.
Mr. Carson?
Aye.
Mr. Haley?
Aye.
Mayor Black?
Aye.
Motion carries with 6 ayes.
All right, so then do we need to kind of give Ann some direction, even though it's not a vote, like a consensus that we want to do X amount per bill?
A credit of up to $30 per bill.
We could go ahead and start working on that before the resolution's passed, if you would like.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? I know we don't have an
You know,
ordinance, but
So just, I'm not sure I'm understanding that, $30 per bill, depending on the amount or just across the board?
Essentially, like, we'd have to go in and do an adjustment on each person's bill anyway. So while it's up, it would be very simple math, in your head to say, okay, it's $5.67, it's less than 30. Just go ahead and adjust off the whole bill. And then anything above 30, you could just do 30. So less room for error.
Okay. I'm good.
Bruce?
Okay, basically with this, we had a couple of good options here, but I really believe that as long as we can do it as cleanly and as efficiently as possible, we'll also be in a position where we're not gonna have to raise taxes next year, because I tell you, citizens, they don't like it whenever we have to raise them, so whichever way we can do it, where we can avoid raising any taxes would be the best way.
All right, so you're okay with the $30 flat? We're talking flat credit, $30, Bruce?
I'm good.
I'll reluctantly go along with that.
Well,
All right. Fair enough. All right.
Thank you.
thank you.
Ann.
All right, so the next is a resolution canceling the second council meeting in November and December for the holiday season.
That's pretty much it.
So we're canceling
November 22nd and December 27th.
So moved.
Second,
All right, any discussion?
It's the norm.
Can we have a Christmas party?
That's your place. All right, roll,
And we can
roll
get
call.
to that for a Christmas party.
Mr. Johansson?
Aye.
Mr. Stanley?
Aye.
Mr. Carson? Mr. Haley?
Aye.
Mr. Hartwick?
Aye.
Mayor Black?
Aye.
Motion carries with 6 ayes.
All right. Wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Gobble, gobble, gobble.
Gobble, gobble.
We're adjourned.